It was a story about the life of a vibrant young man during a tragic time. A story that in its telling reveals much about what happened to America in the 1960s. The more I learned about his life, his war experiences, his personal sacrifice, and the legacy of his poems, not to mention his impact on the people he left behind, the more I began to understand the magnitude of his loss and ours. There is another, perhaps more timely reason that I have written this book. I wanted to understand how a democratic government, presumably with all the best intentions and led by people who considered themselves honorable, effectively decided to sacrifice the lives of its own citizens to advance an ill-considered and poorly developed political idea. If we understand the taking of life to be the ultimate human transgression, we need to understand how such decisions are made, and in this case, without a substantive understanding of purpose or consequences. Before the Vietnam War was over, the United States had sacrificed 58,220 of its citizens. The Vietnamese lost millions more. By the time Michael O'Donnell was sent to Vietnam in October 1969, it was widely, if not publicly, acknowledged by several U.S. presidents, both past and present, and other government and military leaders, the soldiers doing the fighting, and the general public, that there would be no satisfactory outcome to the war. Yet there was still no plan to prevent further casualties and death. Despite massive protests on college campuses and in city streets all across the country, the war would continue with thousands more casualties before the ignominious evacuation of the last Americans in Saigon from the rooftop of the U.S. Embassy in April of 1975. One of those casualties would be Michael O'Donnell. Within a few months of his arrival in Vietnam, Michael O'Donnell understood, as only a soldier can, that he was unlikely to survive and that the sacrifice of his life would not alter the course of the war nor matter to his country. Through his poetry, written in the evenings after experiencing relentless days of trauma and death, all around and even within his helicopter, O'Donnell reflected on what was happening, even as he recognized that he was merely counting the days. As I learned more about Michael O'Donnell and what happened to our country in the 1960s, I became committed to sharing his story. Perhaps it was because I grew up in the shadow of Vietnam and saw firsthand the destruction it wrought on individual lives and on the nation as a whole that Michael O'Donnell's words struck so deeply in me. Although I was not particularly aware of the politics at the time, even as a middle school student, I was taken aback by what I perceived to be a dishonest government engaging in a pointless cause at the expense of real lives. The 1960s was a watershed era with consequences that continue to resonate today. No longer do we assume that our government leaders are to be trusted, and no longer do we presume that they will do the right thing. To the contrary, we expect little from them and are usually not disappointed. Finally, largely through the devastating experience of the Vietnam War, the American people are far more skeptical about the concept of American exceptionalism, the idea that the United States is a unique force for good in the world. I have carried Michael O'Donnell's story with me for many years. I have accumulated a great deal of material, including letters, poems, and even recordings of songs he made while at war. He was a very good singer and, in my view, a terrific songwriter. Over the years, I have also come to know many of the people closest to him during his brief life, including his sister, Patsy McNevin, his closest friend, Marcus Sullivan, his fiancée, Jane Mathis, and many others. They have become good friends. I am grateful to them for sharing Michael and their own stories with me. Michael O'Donnell died in battle 50 years ago, his unrecovered body left behind. His service to our country cost him everything, a sacrifice made all the more painful because he was sure it would be pointless. This book is first and foremost a story about loss and reconciliation for an individual and our nation, but it is also a gesture of respect. For me and those who learn about his story, Michael O'Donnell was not left behind. Prologue, Arlington. All quiet along the Potomac tonight, where the soldiers lie peacefully dreaming, their tents, in the rays of the clear autumn moon, or the light of the watchfire, are gleaming. A tremulous sigh of the gentle night wind through the forest leaves softly and creeping, while stars up above with their glittering eyes keep guard, for the army is sleeping.